They were kings, queens, warriors, and ordinary people whose faces vanished into dust centuries ago. But today, science can pull them back from the shadows. What if you could look Cleopatra in the eye, or see the real face of a Viking raider? This isn't fantasy. It's history resurrected. For most of history, we've been left with bones, tombs, and carvings, but bones don't smile. Statues don't show wrinkles, scars, or fear. We've been missing something essential: the faces of the people who shaped our world. And here's the wild part. Technology now allows us to rebuild those faces with shocking accuracy. CT scans, 3D modeling, DNA analysis, they can turn skulls into lifelike portraits. Suddenly, the dead are no longer faceless names in books. They look back at us. But here's the challenge. Not every face we rebuild matches the myths we've been told. Some of the most powerful figures in history don't look like how we imagined, and that's where things get controversial. So today we're going to take a journey across time, one chapter at a time, as we bring the long-lost faces of history back to life. Chapter 1. The Pharaohs of Ancient Egypt. When you picture a pharaoh, chances are you see the golden mask of Tutankhamun. Smooth, perfect, godlike. But Tutankhamun's real face, far less perfect. Scientists used CT scans of his mummy to reconstruct his face, and what they found was shocking. Tut had a cleft palate, a club foot, and genetic disorders likely caused by inbreeding. His jaw jutted forward awkwardly, his teeth were crooked, and his head shape was elongated. He wasn't the flawless golden boy, he was fragile, sickly, and human. And yet, behind that fragile frame was a boy king who became one of the most famous names in history. The reconstruction stripped away the myth and gave us a young man who looked more like someone you'd pass on the street, tired eyes, weak chin, but still carrying the weight of a kingdom. And then there's Ramses II, the great warrior pharaoh. His mummified remains were scanned, and his face was rebuilt. What appeared was an elderly man with deep wrinkles, sharp cheekbones, and a long hooked nose. Not the godlike ruler of carvings, but a weathered veteran who lived into his 90s. His reconstructed face tells a different story, not eternal youth but survival and grit carved into flesh. These reconstructions remind us that pharaohs were not divine statues, they were humans who aged, suffered, and died like anyone else. Chapter 2. Cleopatra. The real face of a legend. Cleopatra has been painted for centuries as the epitome of beauty, but the truth is we don't really know what she looked like. Ancient coins show a strong nose, sharp chin, and bold features. She wasn't a soft beauty like Hollywood wants us to believe, she was striking. Recent reconstructions based on coins, busts, and her Macedonian Greek heritage suggest Cleopatra had olive-toned skin, a hooked nose, almond-shaped eyes, and strong cheekbones. Not conventionally perfect, but unforgettable. Her face forces us to rethink what beauty meant in her time. Maybe it wasn't about symmetry. Maybe it was about presence, confidence, intelligence, and power. When scientists give Cleopatra a face again, it's less about, was she beautiful? And more about, could you look away when she entered the room? That's the real secret of her face. It carried influence that reshaped empires. Chapter 3. The Vikings. Warriors with real faces. We've all seen the stereotypical Viking, tall, blonde, blue-eyed, rugged. But when researchers reconstructed the faces of real Viking skulls found in burial sites across Scandinavia and England, they discovered something different. One Viking raider buried in England was rebuilt using 3D modeling. His face, dark hair, dark eyes, wide jaw, and a scar running across his skull. Another Viking woman's face was reconstructed, showing softer features but the same sturdy bone structure. And here's the twist, DNA showed that Vikings weren't a single type. They weren't just blonde giants from the north, they had mixed ancestry. Some were darker, some shorter, some with features we'd associate more with Southern Europe. These reconstructions smash the stereotype. The Viking Age wasn't about a single look, it was about a culture of fierce people from many backgrounds. And their faces, when rebuilt, tell us just how diverse they truly were. Chapter 4. Medieval Kings. Faces of Power take Richard III of England. For centuries he was remembered as a twisted, villainous king. Shakespeare described him as deformed and monstrous. But when his skeleton was found under a car park in Leicester, scientists scanned his skull and rebuilt his face. What appeared was not a monster, but a young man with sharp features, narrow eyes, and a thin mouth. Yes, he had scoliosis, which gave him a curved spine, but his face looked almost ordinary. Not a villain, not a hero, just a man. And that's what makes it fascinating. The propaganda painted him as hideous. The reconstruction shows the opposite, a reminder that history is often shaped by who tells the story, not by what was real. Chapter 5. The Mummies of South America. In the dry deserts of Peru and Chile, some of the world's oldest mummies were found, the Chinchorro people, over 7,000 years old. Their mummies are even older than Egypt's. Scientists reconstructed their faces, and what emerged were lifelike portraits of men, women, and children with wide eyes, straight noses, and strong jaws. Suddenly, these were no longer just ancient remains. They were families, communities, people who laughed, cried, and lived by the sea. Bringing their faces back reminds us that history isn't just kings and queens, it's also the ordinary people whose stories rarely get told. Chapter 6. Native Americans' Faces of the First Peoples. One of the most famous reconstructions is of Kennewick Man, a skeleton found in Washington state, over 9,000 years old. His skull was modeled into a face that shocked scientists. It didn't look like the stereotypical Native American. At first glance it seemed more European. But DNA testing proved he was directly related to modern native tribes. This opened up fierce debates about identity and ancestry. But the reconstructed face brought something bigger. It gave native people a visual connection to an ancestor who had been buried for nearly 10,000 years. His face became a bridge between the ancient past and living communities. Chapter 7. Faces from Pompeii Frozen in Time. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 CE buried Pompeii in ash, freezing its people in their final moments. For centuries, we've only seen plaster casts of their bodies, but now 3D scanning lets scientists rebuild their actual faces. One man's face shows his mouth open in a scream, another shows a woman's soft features, eyes forever closed. These aren't statues, they're snapshots of real people caught in disaster. Seeing their faces makes the tragedy of Pompeii hit harder. You're not just looking at ruins, you're looking into the eyes of people who never escaped. Chapter 8. The Controversy of Reconstructed Faces. Here's the thing. Every face reconstruction is both science and art. CT scans and DNA give data, but artists still have to guess about hair, skin tone, and expressions. That means bias can creep in. Sometimes reconstructions spark outrage. When a reconstruction of Jesus based on Galilean skulls appeared, people were stunned. He didn't look like the tall, pale figure in church paintings. Instead, he was short, dark-skinned, with coarse hair and a wide face, far closer to a Middle Eastern man of his time. This shows the power of faces. They can confirm history or challenge what we've always believed. Chapter 9. Why Faces Matter. Why does it hit so hard when we see these reconstructions? Because faces connect us. You can read about Tutankhamun in a book and feel nothing. But when you see his crooked teeth and tired eyes, you realize he was human. He had pain, he had flaws, he had fears. Faces collapse the distance between us and the past. They remind us that history isn't just names, it's people. For centuries, history gave us myths, statues, and stories. But today, science gives us faces. Tutankhamun wasn't golden. Cleopatra wasn't a Hollywood queen. Vikings weren't just blonde giants. And Richard III wasn't a monster, they were real people. And now, they look back at us. Subscribe for more hidden truths from history.